Hello? My name is Luna. That's how I'll start this story, not because I expect you to remember it, but because I need to remember it myself. My name is Luna. And, once upon a time, I was a mother. A wife. And though no one seemed to notice anymore a human being, but on that particular Saturday night in our modest home on the southern edge of Austin, Texas, I felt like nothing more than furniture. It was meatloaf again. Amanda always insisted on making it every weekend, like it was a tradition. Though it never felt like one to me. The peas were overcooked. Limp on the plate like they'd given up trying to matter. Ethan, my son, sat across from me. His head bowed like always, chewing slowly, deliberately, as if focused on solving a puzzle only he could see. Across from him, Amanda was sipping red wine and scrolling through her phone in between bites, laughing at something only she saw. My grandson, Tyler, was at the end of the table, his little legs swinging beneath the chair, absent-mindedly pushing peas around like they were toy soldiers. The television murmured softly from the other room. Some reality show with canned laughter leaking through the walls. And then it happened. Amanda set her fork down with a dramatic clink against the plate. Her tone was light, like someone casually mentioning the weather. She eats here like a queen but doesn't lift a finger. The room fell still. My fork hovered in the air. A bite of meatloaf halfway to my mouth. The words didn't just land, they struck heavy and intentional. Like bricks tossed into the center of a quiet pond. And there were no ripples, just silence. I turned slightly toward Ethan. Waiting. Nothing. He didn't look at me. Didn't speak. His jaw kept working slowly, grinding food as if the words hadn't just happened. As if I hadn't just been undressed in front of my own flesh and blood. Even Tyler looked up, sensing that something had shifted. He might have only been 8. But children can feel the weight of cruelty even when they don't understand it. His eyes flicked from Amanda to me and back again, then dropped to his plate. He didn't speak again for the rest of dinner. I felt heat behind my eyes, but I blinked it away. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't list the dozens of reasons why I wasn't scrubbing the baseboards or chasing laundry like the arthritis swelling my knuckles, or the way my spine ached from years of lifting others before myself. I didn't remind them of the nights I cooked when Amanda had migraines, or the mornings I walked Tyler to the bus stop while Ethan slept off another overnight shift. I didn't mention that I had spent my life saving scraps and clipping coupons so that Ethan could have new cleats for Little League or a tux for prom. Even when I wore the same coat 3 winters in a row, I just breathed. And then I began gathering the dishes. Not with a sigh. Not with attitude. Just with the quiet dignity of someone who had long ago learned to swallow things more bitter than underseasoned meatloaf. As I stood at the sink, washing Amanda's wine glass with the same care I once gave to Ethan's baby bottles, I could hear her laugh again. As if nothing had been said. As if nothing had shifted. But something had. Later that night, I sat alone in the room they called the guest suite. It was a former storage space with a fold-out bed and a narrow window too high to look out of. The ceiling fan clicked rhythmically like a slow metronome keeping time with my breathing. I lay there, fully clothed, hands folded on my stomach, staring up at the plaster above me. From the living room, I could hear laughter. Amanda again. Ethan's lower voice responding. The faint sound of clinking glasses. And I realized I wasn't even part of the background anymore. I was the silence in between their sentences. The house felt like a museum where I had once been important. A time when my touch was needed on every light switch, every lunchbox, every bedtime story. But now I was a ghost they kept fed but barely acknowledged. A mouth at the table, a shadow in the hallway. And I wondered, not for the first time. When exactly had I stopped being seen? Was it the day my husband died and I moved into the guest room? Was it when my knees stopped letting me climb stairs without gripping the rail for dear life? Or had I faded years earlier when Amanda moved in and slowly rearranged the furniture of our family, making me smaller? Step by step, that night, I didn't sleep. Not really. Just drifted in and out of memories like pages fluttering in a breeze. Memories of bedtime stories, birthdays, and snow days in Ohio. Ethan's first bike, my late husband's last breath, and my own voice. Keter now, whispering inside me, is this how my story ends unseen, unwanted a burden? But something else stirred inside that same silence, something I hadn't felt in years. A whisper. Low and steady, curling up from the forgotten corners of my heart. Luna, what if they're wrong? And that was the beginning of everything. Sleep didn't come that night, not even a hint of it. I lay in that narrow excuse for a bed, staring up at a ceiling fan that spun like it had somewhere to go and didn't care that I didn't. The blades clicked with every turn, a soft reminder that time moved on. Even if I didn't, there was a strange hollowness inside me. Not anger, not sadness, even just empty. A kind of emotional erosion that didn't happen overnight. I knew that feeling. It came from being slowly erased. That room they gave me, the guest room, was once a utility closet. They'd cleared it out the month I moved in, shoved a bed and a small dresser in there, slapped on some air freshener and called it home. There was no closet, no view, no light that reached the corners, only a single window set too high to look through, unless you stood on a chair. I hadn't decorated. What was the point? A framed photo here or a throw blanket there didn't make a space yours. Not when your name was missing from the mailbox. Not when the people under the same roof referred to you in past tense. From the other side of the house, I heard laughter. Ethan's voice. Amanda's laugh. The hum of a reality show I didn't recognize. It was the sound of people who didn't know they'd broken something. Or worse, didn't care. I turned over and stared at the wall. My back ached. My hands throbbed. But it wasn't the pain that kept me awake, it was the memory. Funny thing about aging, your body forgets how to be young. But your heart doesn't forget a damn thing. And when no one wants your stories anymore, your mind becomes your only audience. So that night, I remembered. I remembered the lean years in Cleveland when I worked nights at the diner and weekends at the hospital. Ethan's shoes were always a little too big. We bought them that way so he could grow into them. My coat had holes in the lining, but his lunchbox was always full. I remembered my husband, Marcus. When the ALS had taken most of his speech, I spoon-fed him applesauce and pureed soup. I wiped his chin when he drooled and held his hand when he forgot where he was. He died with dignity because I gave him that much. I didn't complain. I didn't ask for help. That was love. Real love. The kind you give without an audience. I remembered how Ethan used to ask me to sit with him at night until he fell asleep. I remembered how he cried when he couldn't find his favorite book. And I remembered how I worked 2 extra shifts one winter just to afford a used saxophone for his school band. He quit a month later. But I never let him feel guilty. And now, after everything, I was a line item in Amanda's complaint list. A mouth? A nuisance. A queen who didn't lift a finger. The cruelty wasn't in the words, it was in the silence that followed. Ethan's silence. My silence. That long? Stretching moment where a grown man let the woman who raised him get gutted at his table and didn't even flinch. I sat up in bed, legs dangling over the edge. My knees popped like old floorboards. I reached for the small nightstand where I kept my rosary, a pair of reading glasses, and an old leather notebook Marcus gave me for our 25th anniversary. On the first page, in his shaky handwriting, it read, "For the things we never want to forget." I hadn't opened it in years. It was where I once jotted recipes, sermon notes, grocery lists, but over time, it had quietly become something else, something sacred. A record not of events, but of endurance, of love given without demand for repayment. I traced the letters with my finger, breathing slowly, trying not to cry. Crying felt wasteful now. A few hours passed. The house grew quiet. The television was off, doors closed, lights dimmed. Only the hum of the refrigerator broke the stillness. And still, I sat. Then came morning. Birds chirped like nothing had happened. The Texas sun poured through the crack under my door, painting a pale golden line on the floor. I rose, washed my face, put on the same cardigan I always did, and walked into the kitchen like everything was normal. I brewed the coffee, folded the laundry Amanda had left half-finished on the couch, picked up Tyler's Lego pieces from the stairs before someone tripped. I even sewed a button back onto Ethan's shirt because I knew he'd never do it himself. And all the while, I said nothing. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I knew no one would listen. 2 days later, they packed up for a weekend getaway. Amanda said it was a couples-only trip. Ethan kissed Tyler on the head, gave me a weak smile, and left without looking me in the eye. I stood at the door after they left, holding the dish towel I'd just folded. The silence wasn't painful anymore. It was instructive. They were gone. And for the first time in years, I was alone in the house, but not empty. Something inside me shifted, not loud, not angry, just quietly certain. I folded one small suitcase, tucked in my notebook, my documents, my rosary, placed the house key on the kitchen table. No noci. No explanation. Just a towel folded beside a key, 2 things I had always done well. Then I walked out the door. Not broken. Not bitter. Just ready. The bus smelled like vinyl and dust, an odd combination of forgotten fast food and old leather. I sat by the window, suitcase tucked between my feet, hands folded over my lap like I was holding something sacred. No one looked at me. No one ever does when you're an older woman riding a greyhound alone with tired eyes and arthritic hands. You become invisible by default. But that morning, I didn't feel invisible. I felt deliberate. The sky was still gray over Austin as we pulled away, the early sun trying to push through layers of stubborn cloud. I watched the streets blur past the grocery store I used to walk to, the diner Ethan took Amanda to on their second date, the corner church where Tyler was baptized. I didn't wave goodbye. Those places were never really mine. I had just passed through them. Or like this bus was now passing through the city. 4 hours later, I was in Denver, standing on a familiar sidewalk in front of a narrow brick building that hadn't changed in over a decade. The brass plate beside the door still read Franklin Calloway, attorney at law. Same chipped frame, same dusty welcome mat. Time had worn it all down. But not away. Frank had been Marcus's best friend since they were teenagers. Played baseball together. Went to Ohio State. He'd been the one who helped us write our wills when Marcus's diagnosis came back terminal. Helped us with insurance. Paperwork. Legalities, the boring stuff that becomes sacred when you're preparing to say goodbye forever. I pushed the door open. A little bell jingled overhead. And there he was. Older. Of course. Thinner hair. Deeper wrinkles. But those same kind eyes that never rushed you? And that quiet strength that made you feel like no matter how complicated things were, he'd find a way through them. Luna, he said, standing slowly. I need to see the deed. I replied, no hello, no pleasantries, just the truth. He didn't ask why. Frank never did. He gestured for me to sit in the old leather chair across from his massive oak desk. The air smelled like it always had aged paper and brewed coffee. He opened a drawer, pulled out a thick manila folder with my name on it, and laid it between us like a priest, placing scripture on the altar. I've kept it updated every year, he said. Just like Marcus asked, he opened it with care. And there it was. My name, the address in Austin, the date the 3rd of August. 1999. Marcus's signature shaky, but clear. Witnessed. Notarized. Legal. It hit me like a gust of wind in the middle of a still room. That house, the one I'd been quietly shamed out of, the one Amanda ruled like a castle she married into, the one where I washed dishes, I didn't dirty and folded clothes. I didn't wear that house had been mine for 24 years. Signed over to me by the man who had loved me until his last breath. I never told Ethan, I whispered. Frank nodded slowly. You thought he'd remember without needing to be reminded. I swallowed. I thought being his mother would be enough. He leaned back, fingers interlaced over his chest. Marcus knew better. That's why he made it legal. I looked down at the papers. Black ink. Yellowing edges. The truth had been here all along. Sitting in a drawer while I slept in a garage, like a guest, overstaying her welcome. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. It wasn't revenge that stirred inside me. It wasn't pride. It was something quieter. Something deeper. Balance. For years, they'd lived in their house, but the truth was they'd been living in mine. I turned to Frank. I want to sell it, I said. He didn't blink. We can list it this week. Quietly, I added, I don't want them to hear it from me. Let the letter do the talking. Frank reached for another folder. I'll handle it personally. When I left his office, the air outside smelled like wet leaves and city dust. The wind blew gently, wrapping around me like a whisper. I held the folder to my chest like armor. Or maybe like scripture. Something sacred. Something earned. I didn't head back to the bus station. I walked. Block after block. Letting the cold bite through my cardigan. Letting each step become a decision. I wasn't leaving anything behind. I was walking towards something. That evening, I returned to the care home I'd checked into a few days earlier. The rooms were small. The food was bland. And the hallway lights flickered sometimes, but it was clean. And no one there rolled their eyes when I asked for a blanket. No one sighed when I needed help opening a jar. I handed a box of pastries to the kitchen staff and gave a small bouquet of daisies to Helen, the woman down the hall who once told me her daughter-in-law made her eat alone in the laundry room. Later, I sat on my narrow bed, unfolded the deed, and stared at it in the dim light. My hands didn't tremble. My breath didn't quicken. I simply read it line by line like a woman finally reclaiming the truth of her own life. I wasn't just a guest. I wasn't just a burden. I was the owner. And for the first time in years, I wasn't asking to stay. I was deciding to let go. There was no grand plan. No mission statement. Just a feeling in my bones that I was done living like I was waiting for permission. The house I found was nothing special. A faded craftsman bungalow in Santa Fe, New Mexico. tucked at the edge of a quiet street that didn't see much more than dog walkers and mail trucks. The porch sagged. The windows needed replacing AFT and NHNDBX. The yard was dry, sunbeaten, dotted with weeds that grew like they knew no one was looking. But I saw something else. It had good bones. I didn't buy it to prove a point. I bought it because it reminded me of what I had lost and what I still might build. Frank handled the paperwork. I paid in full. No mortgage. No second thoughts. Just a clean break and a new beginning. I called it the lighthouse. Not because it was by the sea, there's no water for miles, but because I needed something to shine in the dark. And maybe, just maybe, someone else did too. The first thing I did was rip out the dead grass and plant rosemary and lavender in old bathtubs I found at a salvage yard. The second thing I did was hang a wind chime made of spoons and broken jewelry. It clinked like a secret language only women like me could understand. And then I invited Helen. She was the woman with the pink walker and the sharp tongue who once cried into a styrofoam cup of instant coffee because her daughter-in-law made her eat in the laundry room. I didn't give her a speech or ask her to sign anything. I just said, "There's a room here with your name on it. And the door doesn't lock because there's nothing you have to prove to stay." She showed up with 2 duffel bags, a stack of crosswords, and tears. She tried to hide behind a sarcastic comment about the paint color. I handed her the keys anyway. Next came Margaret, who used to be a schoolteacher and still corrected my grammar when I wasn't paying attention. Then Roland, a retired chef whose husband passed 10 years ago and whose niece told him there was no more room in their condo for his kind of lifestyle. He made the best lemon bars I'd ever tasted. They filled the house with their stories unapologetically, richly. No one asked permission to speak. No one had to pretend to be smaller to fit into someone else's comfort. We became a household of the forgotten, or rather, the re-remembered. I was the unofficial house manager. I grocery shopped. I scheduled dental appointments. I helped Margaret set up her online banking so her son would stop accidentally misplacing her Social Security payments. On Thursday mornings, we had tea and truth, a time when anyone could talk about anything. Grief, regret, favorite recipes, and sometimes, just the weather. On Sundays, we played vinyl records in the living room and danced in socks like we were 16 again. Helen always insisted on Aretha. Roland preferred Sinatra. We compromised with both. One afternoon, as sunlight poured across the porch and the rosemary buzzed with bees, Roland looked over his glasses and said, "You know, we're only alive today because someone once called you a burden." I paused. A garden trowel in hand. Dirt beneath my fingernails. And then I laughed, a deep, honest laugh that came from someplace inside me I hadn't visited in years. Ironic. "Huh," I said. "No," he replied, slicing tomatoes at the outdoor table. "It's poetry." That night, I sat on the edge of my bed and opened my leather-bound notebook again. The same one Marcus gave me. I flipped to a blank page and wrote, "They called me a burden." With the money from that burden, I built a home. Now 4 souls sleep in peace. That was the truest kind of math I'd ever done. We didn't have locks on the inside doors. Not because we didn't care about privacy, but because we trusted each other in ways our own families hadn't. There were no whispers behind closed doors. No biting remarks. No silence used as a weapon. One evening, Helen sat beside me on the porch, chamomile tea in hand, her ribboned walker parked by the railing. "You think we'll ever be truly happy again?" she asked. I looked out at the setting sun, its gold bleeding into the cracked pavement, turning everything soft and beautiful. "I think we already are," I said, This isn't heaven. Helen. But it's ours. She smiled faintly, blinking against the light. You didn't forget me, she whispered. Of course not, I replied. We remember the ones they forget. And we did. Every pot of soup we cooked. Every story we shared. Every laugh that lingered longer than it had to. Those were our proof. We weren't finished. We weren't broken. We weren't invisible. We were still here. Still giving. Still worthy. It didn't happen all at once. The seasons changed slowly. The leaves outside, the lighthouse shifting from green to amber. And with them, something in me shifted too. Peace had a sound. It was the clink of teacups, the soft creak of rocking chairs, the hum of Roland singing to himself while chopping carrots, the laughter of people who weren't afraid to be heard anymore. I had nearly forgotten the date when the call came. Luna, Frank said on the phone. It's done. The house sold this morning. Funds are in your account. You'll receive the deposit confirmation in a day or two. I thanked him and hung up. And then I sat very still. I expected to feel something bigger relief. Maybe. Or satisfaction. But what came was quieter. A closing of a chapter. The last period at the end of a long sentence. 2 days later. The letters were delivered. One from the bank. One from the real estate agency. One hand-delivered, informing Ethan and Amanda that they had 30 days to vacate the property. I didn't gloat. I didn't wait for a reaction. I didn't imagine Amanda's shriek or Ethan's stunned silence. I simply went about my day like usual. I tended to Helen's gardenia, paid the electric bill, helped Margaret figure out Zoom so she could virtually attend her niece's wedding. But the next night, my phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again the next morning. And again. And again. Eventually, I answered. Amanda's voice exploded through the receiver. You evil old woman. You sold our house. That was our home. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't match her rage. I simply replied. No. Amanda. It was my home. You just lived there. She hung up without another word. That night, I sat on the porch, watching the lights twinkle across the street. Helen was inside folding linens. Roland was baking lemon pound cake. I was sipping peppermint tea from a chipped blue mug and listening to the wind move through the lavender. And I felt still. Not triumphant. Not vengeful. Just still. The next call came 2 days later. It was Ethan. Mom, he whispered. His voice hoarse. Like he hadn't slept. We're going to lose everything. I said nothing. We have nowhere to go. Amanda's crying all the time. Tyler doesn't understand what's happening. I messed up. I should have stopped her. I should have stood up for you. I didn't know how to handle it. I let him talk. When he was done, I replied softly. I'm not taking anything from you. I'm only reclaiming what was already mine. There was a long pause. Is there any way to undo it? I closed my eyes. Ethan, I said gently. I gave everything I had to raise you. I never kept score. But the moment your wife insulted me and you stayed silent, something inside me shifted. I don't want your apology. I don't even want your understanding. I just want my silence back. And this is how I earn it. The line went quiet. Then a click. That was the last time he called for a while. And that was okay. Because I had said what I needed to say. That night, I opened my notebook again. The one with Marcus's handwriting on the first page. I flipped through the entries, the tuition I paid, the car loan I co-signed, The months I covered their rent. The groceries during the pandemic. The IVF loan. The dental bills. I'd never added it all before. Over $120. Ling. I hadn't done it to be repaid. I did it because that's what mothers do. But they had forgotten. So I copied every page, every dollar, and every date, and gave it to Frank. This isn't revenge. I told him. It's proof. So one day, if they ever ask why, I won't have to say anything. The numbers will speak for me. He nodded. His face unreadable. You're not wrong. Luna, he said. You're just finally being honest about what it cost. That night, I made one last entry. 2023, sold the house. Built the lighthouse. Worth $0 in interest. Value immeasurable. The house hadn't bought me freedom. It had given me a voice. And I was going to use it. Weeks passed. Then, one late afternoon, he showed up. Ethan. He looked older, not in years, but in weight. His face was tired. His shoulders stooped. There was a humility in his eyes I'd never seen before. I know I don't deserve to be here, he said. I said nothing. Just gestured to the porch chair beside me. We lost everything. He began. Amanda left. Tyler's with her parents. I'm sleeping on a friend's couch. I came because I needed to say thank you. For everything. For what I never said before. Still, I didn't speak. Instead, I reached for a small box beside my chair and pulled out a photograph, 4 people on a sunlit porch. Paint on their shirts. Smiles on their faces. The day we painted the lighthouse together. He stared at it. You built this with the money from he stopped? I nodded. And you didn't spend it on yourself. I shook my head. I built something that grows. He looked at the photo again. And I saw the tears come. Slowly. Without permission. I want to help. He said. With the house. With the people here. I shook my head once more. This place doesn't need your guilt. It needs your growth. And then I handed him a blank piece of paper. A deed, he asked? No. I said. A page. For your next chapter?